level belonging, So I'm gonna invite Umar for 5 minutes speech on Islamic history.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I'll try to keep it for 5 minutes. I tend to talk a lot. So as Dad mentioned, I'm going to speak about my favorite subject in school, but also as a Muslim, obviously history. A lot of people don't see the importance of history, and especially when you have kids, it's absolutely vital that you understand how powerful history can be, because what history does, and once you are affiliated with it, and once you know it really well, it binds you, it connects you to something. And a lot of people, when they don't know the history behind them, they have a disconnect with it. And take our deen, for example. A lot of the kids nowadays speak English, so obviously the language barrier is already there. And if they don't know their history, then they're never going to have that connection that we all should have with our deen. And just an example, role models, for example, like them growing up in England, it's not their fault. Obviously, our parents moved there for a better life. Kids growing up, it's not their fault that, they don't know their history. It's not their fault they don't speak the language. But ultimately, living in this society, what kind of role models are we going to have, let's be honest? Footballers, rappers, so nowadays it's YouTubers, quite popular at the moment. They're the role models. Now, if our kids, our children are seeing them as role models, just think of the impact they might have on their deen. If they're negative role models, for example, then they're going to, might take that negatively towards their deen. And this is why it's important that we first learn our history, and so that we can show our children the history. And I'll give you one example, and I'm alhamdulillah very lucky because my dad loves history. So growing up, he told us all the stories. That's why all my brothers and sisters, we enjoy our history. One example, and I was very lucky to go on a tour to Spain. Now, a lot of adults, forget kids, adults don't even know that there is Islamic history in hundreds of years of Islamic history in Spain. Muslims used to rule Spain for hundreds of years. From about 1300 till about 1100 till about 1458, about 400 years. Now, the reason we don't know about it is because, one, we're not taught in this country. The history, because I've taught history in school, the history we teach, the Tudors, World War II, we look at medieval crusades a little bit, but it's obviously from the Western perspective. But for 300-400 years, Muslims ruled Spain. And we don't know this because in 1458, when the Christians managed, I can spend an hour on this, it's a very long topic, but in 1458, when they got it back from the Muslims for the last time, they were extremely happy, they were jubilant that they got rid of the Muslims in Spain. And eventually they even, fought even more to get rid of them totally. And I'll give you an example where we stayed at that specific place in Granada, and where they buried the Muslims. You know what they call that place? They call it Victory Park. Because they buried the Muslims there, victory, they're happy. And all the Muslims that they promised, we're going to let them stay, eventually they start killing them, they start executing them, until the Ottoman Empire came and rescued them and Jews, not just Muslims. But after that, remember, that was only 500 years ago. We learned about history even more than that, even way back more than that. But the reason we don't know about it is because Europe, right now, Western countries, Britain, France, all of these countries, they don't want that associated with Europe. They don't want Muslims to know that, look, you rule this place. Spain is literally 1.5 hours away, 2 hours away. They don't want you to know that your ancestors, the people that ruled your religion, they rule this area. No, they don't want you to know that. So what they've done to history, they choose the history they want you to learn because they know how powerful it is. And if we don't value it, they win. They get what they want, because then we're not going to be connected to our religion. So it's important that we learn these periods of history so that the role models our children have are the right role models. And some of them, I'll just give you an example, Salahuddin Ayyubi, the one I just mentioned during the Crusades. A lot of our young Muslims don't even know who he is. He literally single-handedly fought against the might of Europe, the Crusaders, single-handedly. Gathered all the Muslims together, took him years. He fought more against his fellow Muslims than he did against the Christians. And once he did, and united all of them, then he got Jerusalem back, he got Masjid al-Aqsa back for the Muslims. And again, I can spend another hour on this because it's so much to talk about. But 100 years before he came, when the Christians took that back, they killed all the Muslims in there. Every single one they killed. And they say that the stories are that there was so much blood, it was running up to their knees or their ankles, I can't remember what it was. That's how much blood, the ankles, that's how much blood it was. But when Salahuddin took it back during the just after the second crusade, he didn't kill a single Christian. He made a deal with them. He goes, we will escort you to the harbour and then you can go safely. And that is why even the Christians respect him. There's a film called Kingdom of Heaven. It's Western perspective, but even they show him as a better ruler than their own Christians. Salahuddin Ayyubi, that's the kind of role model. Another role model, what's his name? Ubayd bin al-Jarrah. A lot of people don't know. He was one of the Ashra Omer Bashir, one of the 10 promised Jannah. He was a Sahaba who joined the cause of the Prophet, one of the followers of the Prophet. And he was such an adamant follower, such an ardent follower, that he himself defeated his own family on the battlefield. His own brother, his own father. He defeated them on the battlefield. He was so in love with the Prophet and the Deen that when he was when protecting the Prophet, he was the one that almost sacrificed his life defending the Prophet. And once he became the ruler of the army, where he was in Syria, where he's buried, there was a plague. And at the time of the plague, what do rulers do when there's danger? Generally, they get away, don't they? They run away. And Umar bin Khattab, wrote to him and said, Ubaidah, I need you, come and see me. In Medina, come and see me. And when he got the letter, he knew why. Because Umar bin Khattab wanted him to come to him, so he's safe, so that nothing happens to him. And Ubaidah bin al-Jarrah was, I would never decline a request of the Khalifa, but the only time I'll deny a request is now, because you are telling me to abandon my people. And he goes, I'm going to follow the sunnah of the Prophet, I'm not going to leave this area because there's a plague, and I'm going to make sure I'm staying with my people, and that's where he passed away.
Thank you.
Yeah? And just to finish off, these are the kind of role models that we need to teach our kids about. So we need to think about history. Jazakallah.